So I want you to just imagine standing in a courtroom for a second.
Okay, a courtroom.
Yeah, like the air's really heavy. There's that dark, polished mahogany everywhere.
Right, very intimidating.
Exactly. And the judge sitting way up there above you is just entirely unreadable.
Oh, I can picture it.
And you've broken like the ultimate rule,
Hmm.
and now you're just standing there waiting for the gavel to drop.
That's a terrifying scenario.
It really is. But in most of our cultural imaginations, I mean, that's exactly what divine justice looks like.
Right, the ultimate courtroom.
Yeah. The gavel comes down, the judge points a finger, and this booming voice just echoes, there is your cell. There is your punishment. Forever.
It's a completely binary system.
Right. Very transactional. You have the quote-unquote saved and the damned.
Mm-hmm.
The in-group and the out-group.
Heaven, and then an eternal torture chamber located somewhere at the edge of the universe.
Exactly. But I want you to picture this for a second. What if you just strip away the courtroom entirely?
Like, completely get rid of it.
Yeah. Imagine a concept of divine justice that doesn't involve an eternal torture chamber at all.
Okay.
But instead, it looks like a demanding, relentless cosmic surgery.
Wow, a cosmic surgery.
Yeah. Like, what if the idea of an eternal hell says a whole lot more about human fear and human vengeance than it does about the divine?
That imagery, going from the courtroom to the operating table, it just completely changes the foundation of how we view morality.
It really does.
I mean, it shifts justice from being this mechanism of pure retribution to, well, a mechanism of healing.
Right.
And honestly, that shift is arguably the most fiercely debated concept in the entire history of theology.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because when you take our flawed, kind of broken human ideas of justice and scale them up to the level of the infinite,
Yeah.
the implications for how we live and how we treat each other, they're just staggering.
Which is exactly why we are plunging into this today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
I'm glad to be here.
We are unpacking a really profound, just incredibly sweeping piece of source material today.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. It's a sermon, or actually maybe a philosophical manifesto is a better word for it, by Tony Eustein.
Right, the chief minister of the Metatronic Church.
Exactly. And for those who might not know, the Metatronic Church is this contemporary spiritual movement.
Yeah, they really emphasize the underlying fundamental unity of the cosmos.
Right, kind of blending ancient mystical traditions with modern restorative frameworks.
And the specific text we're looking at today is titled, The One God, A Message of Universal Love and Restoration.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really dissect his specific radical perspective regarding eternal punishment versus divine restoration.
We're going to map out exactly how he challenges these, centuries-old, deeply entrenched views of hell.
Right, and how he just completely redefines what divine justice actually is.
And crucially, what this theoretical framework demands of you in your daily life. Because theology is useless if it doesn't change how you interact with the world.
Well said. Now, I do want to clarify right up front. Our goal today isn't to tell you if there is or isn't a literal lake of fire waiting for us at the end of time.
Right, we're not taking sides or endorsing these claims.
Exactly. Our job is just to act as your tour guides through the architecture of his arguments.
We just want to impartially explore the thought-provoking implications his ideas carry for anyone who, well, thinks about morality.
So let's just start tearing into the text. He starts his argument at the very bedrock of theology, right?
Yeah, the concept of God's oneness.
Now, usually when I hear the phrase one God, my brain immediately goes to standard monotheism.
Right, like a math equation.
Exactly. It means one deity instead of, I don't know, a pantheon of 10,000 Greek or Roman gods.
But he comes right out of the gate and says, no, this is not a mathematical statement.
Right.
He says if you're just counting deities, you are missing the entire point.
He is incredibly adamant about that distinction.
He defines this oneness not as a head count, but as a definitive statement about the fundamental structure of reality itself.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, he argues that to say God is one is to say that reality is not finally divided.
Reality is not finally divided.
Right. It means that the universe at its core and at its ultimate destiny is not fractured into competing, irreconcilable parts.
I need to pause on that.
Yeah.
Because saying reality is not finally divided sounds like a massive universe-altering claim.
It absolutely is.
Because if reality isn't divided, what does that actually mean for the things we experience every day that feel, completely at odds with each other?
Well, it means that the attributes we often perceive as competing forces are, in the ultimate sense, harmonized.
Okay.
He points out that human beings tend to categorize everything into opposing binaries.
Oh, for sure. We love putting things in boxes.
Exactly. We think love and truth are sometimes enemies. Like, to be truthful, you have to be unloving, or to be loving, you have to hide the truth.
Right. Or we think justice and mercy are opposites.
Yes. We think if you are just, you cannot be merciful, and if you are merciful, you're somehow ignoring justice.
But he is setting up a logical premise here.
He is. He says, if the source of all things is truly one and whole, then these things cannot be at war within the divine.
Wow, so justice and mercy are the same action.
Love and truth are the same breath. And most importantly, creation and the creator are not strangers.
Okay, so he's essentially building a philosophical trap for the traditional view of the afterlife here, isn't he?
He absolutely is. He's laying the groundwork.
He's saying that if God is undivided, then a permanently fractured eternity is philosophically impossible.
Right, an eternity where 50% of creation is saved and enjoying paradise, and 50% is damned in eternal torment.
Right, because that would mean that God is permanently divided against himself.
That is the core of his initial logical sequence. A permanently divided creation would reflect a divided creator.
Makes sense.
He argues that a God who acts as a heavenly judge who loves a soul for a season during their earthly life and then violently hates that same soul for all of eternity,
Yeah.
well, that's a fragmented, inconsistent entity.
And he critiques, with a lot of weight, how human religion has historically mishandled this concept of the infinite.
Oh, he has a great quote for this. He writes, "The tragedy of religion is that human beings often take the infinite and make it small."
Let's talk about that small God concept for a second.
Yeah,
Because these sociological implications here are huge.
they really are.
Why do we do that? Why would humanity take something boundless and actively try to shrink it down to, like, fit in our pockets?
It really comes down to deep evolutionary survival mechanisms and human psychology.
Right, because we are tribal by nature.
Exactly. For millennia, our survival quite literally depended on the cohesion of our specific in-group.
And defending against the out-group, you had to know who was safe and who was dangerous.
Right. So historically, as human beings developed religious frameworks, they naturally preferred a deity that aligned with their specific tribe.
Or their nation, or their political structure.
Yeah, a god who fights for our crops, our armies, and our success.
Because it's incredibly comforting. If the omnipotent creator of the cosmos is exclusively on my side, then I am inherently safe.
And you, my enemy, are inherently not.
Exactly. Justine writes that we take the boundless and we build a theological fence around it.
We essentially use the concept of God as an emblem for our own group superiority.
Yeah, when a nation or a group says God is with us, what they are secretly whispering is God is against them.
It is the ultimate projection of in-group bias onto the cosmos.
It really is.
When a religious institution or a nation claims exclusive ownership of divine favor, they are weaponizing the concept of God.
Right, to legitimize their own earthly power or just to soothe their own anxieties about death and meaning.
And he is systematically attacking this tribalism. He states, God is not a possession. God is the possessor of all.
He is calling out the profound arrogance of believing that the infinite reality of the universe can be fully captured in a single theological formula.
Or confined to one specific sacred text, or locked inside a particular building.
Okay, let's ground this with an analogy because the concept of capturing the infinite is pretty abstract.
Sure, go for it.
Imagine you are standing on the shore of a boundless, wild, roaring ocean.
Okay, got it.
The waves are crashing, it stretches beyond the horizon, it's completely untamable.
Sounds beautiful.
Right? But instead of standing there in awe, you decide to rope off a tiny 10 by 10 square of the water near the beach.
Just a tiny square.
Yeah, you throw up some cheap pool tiles, you put up a members-only sign, you hire a lifeguard to enforce a strict dress code,
Naturally.
and then you declare to the rest of the world that you are the sole exclusive owner of water.
That's brilliant.
You've turned the ocean into a private guarded swimming pool,
Yeah.
and you tell everyone else they are dying of thirst.
That perfectly captures the absurdity he is trying to highlight.
Right.
You've taken something that is life-giving, untamable, and fundamentally universal, and you have artificially enclosed it purely to control access.
You want to be the gatekeeper of the water.
Exactly, but as he points out, the ocean doesn't care about your pool tiles. The ocean naturally exceeds any boundary you try to impose on it.
Okay, but wait. I'm stuck on this a bit.
What's the sticking point?
Well, if God isn't contained in our language or our fences or our specific religious doctrines, How does a human being even begin to interact with this?
That's a very fair question.
Because we need language, right?
Yeah.
We need symbols and stories and rituals just to make sense of the world.
Of course we do.
Are we just supposed to sit in silence and abandon all theology?
Well, no. And he anticipates that exact dilemma. He isn't advocating for the destruction of language or doctrine.
Okay, that's a relief.
He doesn't say our rituals are useless. He says they are insufficient. They are pointers, not the destination.
Ah, I see.
He uses this incredibly evocative metaphor in the text. He says, our doctrine reaches toward God like a child reaching toward the stars.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful image.
Isn't?
Yeah, it implies a genuine effort and a real sense of wonder, but also an inherent massive limitation.
Right. The child is doing their absolute best, but their arm is only 2 feet long.
And the child's reach is genuine. It is an authentic expression of desire and awe.
But the child is not actually grasping the star, and it would be delusional for the child to claim they had the star in their pocket.
So true.
So he is arguing that deep, radical humility is the only logical posture for any believer.
Because the one God exceeds our speech, our rituals, and crucially, exceeds the theology of any single era of human history.
He essentially says that if you truly believe in a singular, infinite God, you must be the most humble person in the room.
Because you recognize that the divine is vastly greater than your limited human comprehension.
Exactly.
So he spends this entire first portion of the text completely dismantling the private swimming pool God.
He does. He establishes this unshakable foundation of an ultimate, universal, undivided reality.
And he has to do this because he is setting the logical foundation for his biggest, most controversial target.
The big one.
Right. Because if reality isn't fundamentally divided by a tribal God who plays favorites, we have to logically re-examine the ultimate, most severe division human religion has ever created.
The doctrine of heaven versus an eternal hell.
The deconstruction of eternal punishment is the absolute crux of his message here.
It really is. And he dismantles it using the exact structural logic he just established.
Right.
If God is universally loving and if God's nature is fundamentally undivided.
Then creating billions of human souls with the foreknowledge that they will experience endless suffering is a stark, unresolvable, logical contradiction.
He does not pull any punches here.
Not at all. He boldly states that a God who creates souls for endless suffering is absolutely not a revelation of divine love.
Or a God who, in his words, sets eternity on fire and calls it justice.
God setting eternity on fire. What a phrase.
He argues it is nothing more than a projection of human fear and human trauma.
We really need to unpack the psychological insight there because it's profound.
Let's do it.
He is arguing that the concept of eternal punishment reveals the shadow of human fear.
Think about how easily wounded human beings project their own desire for vengeance.
Oh, all the time. When we are deeply harmed, when we feel powerless in the face of an injustice, our biological instinct is to see the scales balanced with extreme prejudice.
We want the person who hurt us to suffer, often more than we suffered. We crave retribution.
And because human justice systems often fail to deliver that satisfying retribution, we have historically imagined a cosmic judge who will carry it out for us.
An ultimate, infinite retribution on our behalf.
It's outsourced vengeance. We can't legally torture our enemies forever, so we write a theology where God does it for us.
And we call it holy.
Exactly. And he also directly calls out how religious and political institutions have capitalized on this exact psychological vulnerability.
The historical utility of hell.
Right.
If we look at human history, the doctrine of eternal conscious torment has been an incredibly effective tool for producing compliance.
I mean, why else has this specific terror survived for so long across so many different cultures and traditions?
Because terror is the most efficient mechanism for control.
It really is. If you are an ancient king or a medieval church leader and you need to enforce social order, you can only threaten people with physical death up to a point.
Exactly. But if you can convince a population that the penalty for stepping outside the established bounds is literal, never-ending agony in a lake of fire.
You have secured their absolute obedience.
Because fear bypasses logic. Fear makes people bow down instantly.
It really does.
But he makes a critical distinction here. He acknowledges that fear can produce strict obedience. A terrified population will follow the rules.
Right.
But fear can never, ever produce communion. It cannot produce genuine love, and it cannot produce a healed, whole society.
So by reframing hell as a primitive human projection rather than a divine reality, He is completely stripping institutions of their favorite tool of control.
He's disarming the theology of terror.
And he uses this emotional lever in the text that I think anyone listening can instantly relate to.
The parent analogy.
Yes. He essentially asks if we, as flawed, selfish, broken human beings, are somehow more merciful than the creator of the universe.
It's a great question.
He says, think of the absolute best human parent you know. A loving, healthy parent will correct their child, right?
Of course, they will discipline them.
They will allow them to face the consequences of their actions to help them grow.
But under no circumstances would a healthy human parent desire the endless, permanent, agonizing torture of their child.
Never. A parent would never say, because you made mistakes during your 20 years in my house, I'm now going to lock you in a burning basement forever.
And I'm going to enjoy watching.
Exactly. If a human did that, we would call them a psychopath.
It's a devastating comparison.
It really is. If the best human parent would never even consider such a monstrous act, why do we eagerly attribute that exact behavior to the infinite source of all love?
Why do we make God morally inferior to a decent human being? He uses this contrast of scale to expose the absurdity of the doctrine. He writes, "Our mercy is a spark. God's mercy is the sun."
Oh, I love that.
He's arguing that if our flawed, limited, partial human hearts recoil in horror at the idea of endless torture, that revulsion is not a sign of spiritual rebellion.
That was the line that gave me chills. He says that the revulsion you feel in your gut when you think about eternal suffering might actually be the voice of God within us refusing to call cruelty holy.
That the divine spirit is working inside you to reject a lie.
That completely inverts the traditional religious script.
It really does. In fear-based theological systems, if you question the doctrine of hell, you are immediately accused of lacking faith.
Or of embracing a dangerous heresy prompted by your own arrogance. You were told to silence your conscience.
But he reframes that exact questioning as evidence of a healthy divine intuition.
He argues that an infinite love literally cannot lose its creation to infinite misery.
He poses the ultimate question: what kind of victory is it if evil keeps even one soul forever?
Right. If hell exists eternally alongside heaven, then God didn't really win.
The universe remains permanently, tragically divided.
And evil has carved out a permanent monument to its own power.
Okay, but let me put on my skeptic's hat for a second.
Go for it.
If there is no eternal hell, if the ultimate cosmic torture chamber is closed for business, the immediate reaction for a lot of people is going to be, well, then nothing matters.
Right, the classic where are the consequences argument.
Exactly. If universal love means everybody gets a free pass at the end of the day, then why not just live completely selfishly if we all end up in the same paradise anyway?
He definitely has to tackle this because rejecting eternal suffering cannot mean rejecting accountability.
And he does tackle it vigorously. This brings us to a massive pivot in his framework: the complete redefinition of judgment.
He knows that a theology without accountability is just cheap sentimentality.
He argues that universal love is not a blanket thrown over injustice. It is a flame brought to injustice.
A flame brought to injustice. That does not sound like a free pass.
Not at all.
He says judgment is not destruction. It is surgery. It is a cleansing fire that burns away the chains, but saves the soul.
Right.
Explain the mechanics of this. How does, cosmic surgery actually work?
To understand this, we have to heavily contrast two different paradigms of justice.
Right.
The system we are most familiar with is retributive justice. Retribution is entirely focused on payback.
Balancing the cosmic scale.
Exactly. It attempts to balance those scales by inflicting an equivalent amount of pain on the wrongdoer. You cause suffering, therefore you must suffer.
But the philosophical problem, as he points out, is that eternal retributive torment actually preserves sin and suffering forever.
It takes the pain of the world and immortalizes it. It keeps the wound open for all eternity.
It's like it doesn't fix the broken window. It just beats up the kid who threw the rock and leaves the glass shattered on the floor.
That is exactly the right image. Restorative divine justice, on the other hand, is aimed at completely destroying evil by transforming the heart of the wrongdoer.
It fixes the window.
He argues that true judgment is the moment when lies can no longer hide. It is an event of radical, inescapable truth-telling.
He describes it as the moment when the oppressor must finally look directly into the face of the oppressed.
Yes.
When the selfish person has to actually feel the crushing weight of the pain they caused or the suffering they ignored.
It would be an unbearable spiritual reckoning.
I mean, think about the worst thing you've ever done to someone else. Now imagine having to experience the exact emotional devastation you caused them, with zero ability to rationalize it or make excuses or look away.
That doesn't sound like a light slap on the wrist.
Not at all. That sounds psychologically excruciating.
To have all your lifelong rationalizations, your ego defenses, your justifications completely stripped away, to fully experience the unvarnished reality of your actions. That is a profound and terrifying form of judgment.
But the critical difference between this and traditional hell is the purpose of that pain.
Exactly. In retributive justice, the pain is the end goal. The pain is the point. In restorative justice, the pain is the agonizing surgery required to remove the tumor of selfishness. The goal is always, ultimately, healing.
And he uses these incredible sweeping metaphors from the natural world to illustrate how this restorative process is baked into the fabric of the universe.
Oh, the cosmic metaphor.
Yeah. He points to the cosmos. He talks about how galaxies moved in vast spirals. Stars are born, they burn for billions of years, and then they collapse in on themselves in these violent supernovas.
Right, and they scatter their heavy elements out into the dark void of space.
And from the debris of that violent collapse, new solar systems and new planets are born. He says death becomes the raw material for new life.
And he brings that cosmic scale right down to the dirt beneath our feet, too.
Yeah, the seed metaphor.
He talks about a seed falling from a tree into the dark, damp earth, is buried, it decays, the outer shell is entirely destroyed.
But that destruction is what allows the new green shoot to break open and reach for the sun.
The forest floor has to receive the dead leaves to create the nutrient-rich soil required to grow something new.
So he's showing that the universe simply does not move in a straight line of crime and punishment.
It moves in cycles of profound transformation.
God doesn't overcome darkness by building a bigger, scarier, permanent dark room to lock the bad people in.
No, God overcomes darkness by being light and forcing the darkness to dissipate.
Which brings us to the most delicate, the most philosophically sensitive, and arguably the most important challenge to this entire framework.
We have to talk about the victims.
We really do.
Yeah.
Because I can hear someone listening right now, someone who has survived horrific abuse, thinking it is incredibly easy for two people on a deep dive to sit around and talk about beautiful restorative cosmic cycles.
But what about the tyrant who slaughtered thousands?
Right. What about the abuser who destroyed my childhood? What about the person who ruined my family?
It's the most urgent question.
And Eustain explicitly warns against what he calls spiritual carelessness. He says you absolutely cannot just walk up to a victim of severe trauma and cheerfully say, hey, don't worry, God loves everyone, even your abuser, and dismiss their pain.
To do so would be a profound failure of love. It would be inflicting a secondary trauma on the victim.
It really would.
He is incredibly careful to state that an all-loving God must begin with absolute truth and validation.
He writes that God sees the tear that fell in secret. God knows the name of every single person who was ever crushed beneath the wheels of cruelty.
God does not look at the victim and say, your pain doesn't matter in the grand scheme of eternity.
Instead, God says, your pain matters so infinitely much that I will not allow the world that caused it to remain unchanged.
I will not allow the world that caused it to remain unchanged.
That line stopped me in my tracks, because it shows how restorative justice actually honors the victim far more deeply than retributive justice ever could.
How so? Walk me through that.
Think about it. If you just take an abuser and lock them in a fiery cage forever, you haven't actually healed the abuser's brokenness.
And you haven't truly vindicated the victim.
Right. You've just quarantined the sickness in a different dimension. The evil still exists.
But if divine justice demands that the abuser is stripped of their toxic illusions, forced to face the agonizing reality of their actions,
and is ultimately painfully transformed into someone who repents and learns how to truly love.
that is the total, absolute defeat of the evil that hurt the victim. The monster doesn't exist anymore.
That is the ultimate victory over trauma.
Eternal torment essentially says, the wound you suffered remains a permanent fixture of eternity.
While divine restoration says God will systematically heal even what human history could not heal.
He argues that this restorative view is actually the most demanding, rigorous vision of justice imaginable.
Because it doesn't let anyone off the hook by just locking them away. It demands their total transformation.
It demands that the universe will eventually be completely whole.
Okay, so we've established that God is one, reality is undivided, hell is a human projection of fear, and true judgment is an excruciating but ultimately restorative cosmic surgery that honors victims by destroying evil at its root.
That's the framework so far.
But any theologian, philosopher, or, armchair debater listening is going to raise their hand right now and point out the giant elephant in the room.
Ah, yes. Free will.
What about free will?
This is the massive theological hurdle. It is the primary reason many deep thinkers refuse to embrace universalism.
The logic is very straightforward, right? If human beings have true, authentic free will, they must have the inherent ability to say no to God.
And if they can say no, then it is theoretically possible for a soul to stubbornly, relentlessly reject God's restorative surgery forever.
Therefore, a permanent state of alienation, which we call hell, must exist as a tragic but necessary monument to human freedom.
Right. Because if God just eventually wears down your resistance until you have no choice but to be healed, isn't that just divine psychological warfare?
How is that not a hostage situation where the captor just waits for Stockholm Syndrome to kick in?
He acknowledges this tension. He agrees we are living souls, not programmable machines.
We can resist, we can hide in our shame, we can fiercely choose falsehood.
But then he pivots and asks a question that shifts the entire scale of the debate.
What's the question?
He asks, is human resistance stronger than divine wisdom? Can finite human stubbornness actually defeat infinite divine love forever?
And he argues philosophically that it cannot.
Right. And he doesn't just say this as a hopeful wish. He grounds this argument in a very classical philosophical understanding of what darkness and sin actually are.
He argues that darkness is not a substance that is equal and opposite to light. Right.
Exactly. It doesn't have an independent throne or its own atomic structure. Darkness is merely a privation.
A privation, like the absence of something.
Yes, it is the deprivation, the absence of light. When light fully arrives in a room, darkness cannot stand its ground and negotiate. It simply ceases to exist.
But he's saying evil isn't the comic book equivalent of good. It's just a sickness.
It's a twisting or a decaying of what was originally good.
This aligns closely with ancient thinkers, right? Like Augustine.
Very much so. Augustine argued that evil is a corruption of goodness, not a thing in itself.
And because of that, Justine makes a brilliant leap regarding human freedom.
He argues that an addiction to darkness, an obsession with hatred, or a compulsion toward cruelty, these are not expressions of true freedom.
This was the absolute light bulb moment for me in the text.
It's a game changer.
Because in our modern culture, we often define freedom as just the raw ability to choose between option A and option B.
Even if option B is drinking literal poison, we say, well, it was my free choice to drink it.
But he says, no, a person trapped in hatred is not free. A person severely compromised by trauma and addiction to cruelty is not acting freely. They're acting out of their sickness.
Precisely. To use an extreme example, we wouldn't say a person in the depths of severe chemical addiction is making completely free choices when they pursue their next fix at the expense of their family.
Their will is compromised by the disease.
He argues that true freedom is the ability to fully love, the capacity to receive love, and the clarity to live in truth.
Therefore, when God acts as the cosmic surgeon and heals a soul of its hatred, God is not violating its free will. God is fulfilling it.
God is removing the cataracts of sickness that compromise their free will in the first place.
But wait, I'm still stuck on the mechanics of this.
Okay, what's holding you up?
Even if it's healing, if I lock myself in a dark room and scream, I don't want to come out, I hate the light, and God picks the lock, breaks down the door, and drags me out into the sun. Is that love?
Or is that just coercion by a more powerful being?
Right.
He is incredibly careful with his language here to avoid that exact critique of divine coercion.
What does he say?
He writes that this ultimate restoration happens not by coercion, not by force, not by manipulation, but by revelation.
Revelation.
He uses the analogy of a deeply held lie. When the truth becomes undeniably, radiantly, overwhelmingly clear, the lie naturally loses its power over the mind.
Oh, I see.
It's not that God forces the soul to believe the truth against its will, like a tyrant forcing a confession.
It's that God's infinite patience and illuminating light eventually reveal the reality of the universe so clearly that the soul's fearful, confused resistance simply melts away.
The soul chooses the light because it finally sees clearly.
It's like a terrified child throwing a massive tantrum, running away from a parent because they broke a window, and they are absolutely convinced they are going to be violently punished.
Right. They hide in the closet, holding the door shut.
But the parent doesn't break the door down. The parent just sits outside the closet, patiently waiting.
Sliding notes of love under the door, constantly reassuring the child they are safe.
Until the child finally exhausts their own stubborn fear, realizes they aren't going to be hit, and voluntarily opens the door.
He says, I believe divine love can wait longer than human stubbornness can endure.
It's a profound reframing of the timeline of salvation. It shifts the power dynamic entirely back to the divine.
Think about the traditional free will argument.
Hmm.
It essentially dictates that a confused, finite human being has the ultimate power to permanently defeat God's desire to save them.
It makes human error more powerful than God.
He argues that this gives finite human confusion way too much credit. He simply refuses to accept the premise that human stubbornness is the strongest, most enduring force in the universe.
So if human stubbornness isn't the strongest force, and God's restorative love eventually, patiently overcomes all resistance through pure revelation,
Yeah.
well, that fundamentally breaks our traditional understanding of the afterlife timeline.
It changes how we view the concept of eternity.
Right. If there's no eternal ticking clock where you have to get all your theological ducks in a row before your heart stops beating or else you burn, what does eternal actually mean in this framework?
He argues that humanity has fundamentally misunderstood and mistranslated the word eternal.
Really?
Yeah. He points out that across the history of spiritual interpretation, brilliant, faithful minds have debated whether the ancient language of judgment points to an endless duration of time.
Or to the nature and quality of the experience itself?
Exactly. He redefines eternal from being a measurement of time on a cosmic stopwatch to being a description of the very nature and character of God.
He writes, when we say eternal, let us say love, eternal mercy, eternal restoration.
He's saying eternity is a quality.
Like if a ring is made of solid gold, it's gold all the way through. If God is eternal love, that love goes all the way down. It doesn't run out after 70 years of human life.
Yes. But introducing this concept of inexhaustible, unending divine patience immediately triggers a very cynical, albeit incredibly common, human reaction.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going.
Do you?
The classic inevitable question. Well, if everybody is saved eventually and there's no permanent hell, why bother following God right now?
Why be good? I might as well just do whatever I want, act entirely selfishly, and let God sort it out in the cosmic surgery later.
Right. Justine finds this specific question incredibly revealing about the person asking it.
He points out that asking, why be good if there's no hell, reveals just how deeply our religious and moral imaginations have been entirely colonized by fear.
It's like asking, if I know for an absolute fact that my mom won't lock me in a burning basement forever for disobeying her, why should I bother being nice to her or helping her with the groceries?
Exactly. If you ask that question, you are revealing that you fundamentally misunderstand what a loving relationship is.
You're treating your mother like a dangerous hostage taker, and your quote-unquote good behavior is just you trying not to get shot.
That analogy perfectly hits the nail on the head. He asks his audience, do we love goodness only because we fear punishment? Do we care for the poor, the sick, and our neighbors only because we want a cosmic reward?
He draws a hard line between a fear-based theology and a love-based spirituality.
A fear-based theology constantly asks, what is the bare minimum I must do? What are the exact rules I must follow to avoid being punished?
It is a moral system entirely focused on selfish self-preservation.
Whereas a love-based theology asks a completely different question. How can I become more fully alive right now?
It completely changes your core motivation. You don't avoid acting selfishly because you're terrified of a lightning bolt or a lake of fire.
You avoid selfishness because you realize it actively harms you, it damages the people around you, and it severs your communion with the source of life.
You want to be healthy now, not just avoid pain later.
He illustrates this dynamic brilliantly by referencing the ancient parable of the prodigal son.
Oh, we all know the story of the rebellious younger brother who wastes his inheritance and comes home.
But he focuses on the older brother.
The older brother who stayed home, worked hard, and did everything right was deeply, bitterly offended when the younger brother came back and was immediately restored and celebrated by the father with a feast.
The older brother was furious because he wanted fairness. He wanted the ledger balanced. He felt his hard work was devalued if the bad brother got the same love.
He secretly wanted his brother to be punished. He resented the father's mercy.
Exactly the point. The older brother's obedience was rooted in duty and expected reward, not in love for his father or his brother.
He writes, the scandal of divine love is the joy of the universe.
The father in the story doesn't deny that the prodigal son made terrible, destructive choices, but the father rejoices over the return and the healing.
He asks, if that is the heart of God for one single prodigal, why wouldn't it be the heart of God for every soul ever created?
He argues that the absence of the threat of eternal torment doesn't weaken human devotion. It actually purifies it.
It strips away the lowest, most selfish human motive, the fear of pain, and invites us into the highest possible motive.
Deep gratitude and a genuine desire to participate in the healing of the world right now.
He writes, instead of evangelizing through fear, we witness through beauty.
That is a stunning paradigm shift.
But I want to pull this down from the philosophical clouds. This is all very lofty, beautiful theology, but theology is completely useless if it doesn't change how we actually live, operate, and treat each other on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Which brings us to the final major movement of his text, what he calls the discipline of the heart.
How does bringing this sweeping divine theory down to earth actually work in practice?
He is explicitly clear that universalism is not just an armchair philosophy to debate in academic circles about the afterlife.
He insists it is a discipline of the heart, is a rigorous, demanding, daily framework for human interaction in the present moment.
If you believe God will restore everyone, it changes how you must treat everyone today.
He lays out very practical, incredibly difficult demands. First, he says it requires living without any trace of spiritual arrogance.
If God is universally restoring every single soul, you cannot look at any human being as disposable or permanently broken.
He specifically lists people in the text to make it real. The cashier who was rude to you, the neighbor you can't stand, the person online who constantly irritates you, the troll.
And even the person who has deeply hurt others, he says every single one of them is an active soul in the field of divine love, undergoing their own process.
This is where the severe cognitive dissonance of universalism becomes apparent in our daily lives.
It is very, very easy to preach universal love in the abstract. It is incredibly difficult to practice it when someone cuts you off in traffic or betrays your trust.
He acknowledges this massive friction. He writes a piercing line. It is easy to reject hell in our doctrines while actively practicing hell in our relationships.
Oof. Practicing hell in our relationships. That stings, because we do it all the time.
We do. We cancel people. We write people off as permanently ruined or inherently toxic.
We speak with absolute contempt about those who disagree with us, politically, socially, or theologically.
We create our own little mini hells of exclusion and cast our enemies into them.
He is demanding that we stop weaponizing our religion, our politics, and our own self-righteousness.
He argues that religion and philosophy should be a bridge to connect humanity, never a cage to separate the quote-unquote pure from the impure.
He also pushes the timeline into the present. He says we have to become healers right now.
You cannot just shrug and say, oh, well, God will heal all things in eternity, so the suffering of the world doesn't matter.
You can't ignore the hungry person sitting right in front of you today because of a theological promise about tomorrow.
Universal love requires particular immediate physical acts of compassion.
But he also tackles a very real, modern psychological issue here. The friction between holding necessary boundaries and refusing cruelty.
This is vital, because critics of universalism often claim that universal love just means becoming a passive doormat for abusive people.
He firmly rejects that. He says love sometimes says no. Love steps away from toxic situations.
Love builds a strong boundary so that healing can actually happen for both the victim and the perpetrator.
Universal love does not require us to tolerate abuse, enable addiction, or ignore the truth of someone's harmful behavior.
But here's the caveat, and it's a massive, incredibly challenging one. He says even when we build those boundaries, even when we resist evil, our resistance must be entirely free of hatred.
Our defense must be free of dehumanization.
I want you to really think about this for a second. Think about your fiercest political opponent. Think about the ex-friend who deeply betrayed you.
Think about the person who failed you completely when you needed them most.
He says, the moment you secretly enjoy the thought of them suffering, the moment you reduce them from a complex, broken human being to just a quote-unquote monster, you have let the doctrine of hell colonize your imagination.
You've built a torture chamber in your own mind.
How incredibly, almost impossibly difficult is this standard to live by?
It is arguably the most difficult psychological and spiritual standard a human being can attempt.
To fiercely confront wrongdoing, to demand justice and truth, but to do so without ever dehumanizing the wrongdoer.
It requires a level of emotional maturity and spiritual discipline that is exceedingly rare. It requires constantly cleansing your own imagination of cruelty and the desire for retribution.
And crucially, as he closes his manifesto, he turns this demanding restorative lens entirely inward.
He says, you must also allow yourself to be loved. And honestly, this might be the absolute hardest part for a lot of people.
You might be listening to this entire deep dive and thinking, sure, this is a beautiful concept. God loves humanity, cosmic restoration, great.
But God knows what I did in secret. God knows my specific shame. I am the exception to this universal rule.
He addresses that inner critic directly. He writes, "You are not the one soul God forgot how to forgive."
He brilliantly identifies how toxic shame operates differently than healthy humility.
Humility says, I am flawed, I make mistakes, and I need grace.
Shame says, I am inherently broken, I'm a mistake, and the divine should not love me.
He is aggressively calling his audience out of the paralyzing lie of shame and inviting them into the truth of a love that relentlessly seeks them out, no matter how complicated their story is or how unfinished their healing remains.
It's a total ground-up paradigm shift of how we view ourselves, our enemies, and the universe.
Okay, let's try to distill this massive philosophical journey we've been on today.
We started at the bedrock, looking at a structural view of God's oneness, the profound idea that reality itself is not, finally, eternally divided.
From that foundation, we explored how he systematically dismantles the fear-based doctrine of an eternal hell, arguing that it's a primitive human projection of vengeance rather than a divine truth.
We then analyzed his profound redefinition of judgment. He moved us away from the concept of a retributive cage where evil is preserved forever.
Into the concept of a cosmic surgery, a restorative justice that destroys evil by radically transforming the wrongdoer through unavoidable truth.
We tackled the heavy debate around free will, exploring the philosophical concept of evil as a privation, and seeing how infinite love ultimately outlasts finite human resistance through patient revelation, not violent manipulation.
We looked at how redefining the word eternal from a stopwatch to a character trait completely changes our daily motivations, shifting us from a paradigm of self-preserving fear to one of expansive love.
And finally, we landed on the intensely practical, incredibly grueling challenge of the discipline of the heart.
The mandate to practice universal love right now, to hold firm boundaries without giving in to hatred, and to recognize that absolutely no one is beyond restoration, including the person in the mirror.
It is a sweeping, incredibly comprehensive alternative to the theologies of terror and control that have dominated so much of human history and shaped our cultural psyche.
It really is. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought that builds on everything we've explored today.
If we take his premise seriously, that true divine justice is not about a courtroom gavel, a ledger of debts, or an eternal torture chamber, but is instead about perfect, relentless, restorative healing.
Think about what that means for us down here on Earth. If we, as a global society, truly absorb the idea that the absolute highest, most divine form of justice is healing rather than endless punishment.
How would that completely dismantle and rebuild our human justice systems?
It would upend everything. How would it change our courts? How would we structure our prisons if the goal was actually genuinely restoration instead of just caging the sickness?
Exactly. But even closer to home, how would it change how we handle the next bitter, screaming argument we have with a partner or a friend?
If the ultimate infinite reality of the universe simply refuses to give up on the broken pole, what does it mean that we so quickly do? Something to think about. Until next time.